So it's a confusing time for a lot of people. Most people aren't Medicare experts. Most people, when they're 64, 65, they're just looking forward to retiring. And the reality is they start getting all that mail, and they've got to try to figure out, if they're not getting help, they've got to try to figure out what the heck they're supposed to do when it comes to Medicare. So when we've got a client at CKE Financial, I typically say 64 to 64 and a half. We get them plugged in with a licensed Medicare specialist at Raymond James. And we make that phone call with the client, get them connected to someone that is an expert in this field. And I usually jump off the phone and let them talk a little bit more. But what they then go through is what the situation is, what the medications are, and all the important things to help them make a good decision on which Medicare plan to go with. And there's never any cost to a client to do this. There's no cost from Raymond James or CKE. And then the consultant that we talk to, they don't charge anything either. Their job is to make sure that our clients are taken care of and make sure that they choose the right plan for them. And taking a step forward too, that it's not just when somebody's 64 and a half to 65. We've got clients that we continue to connect with the licensed Medicare specialist ongoing, especially if there are changes in prescription medication, as an example.
Great. Lynda, can you talk a little bit more about how income can affect Medicare premiums?
Yes, it's an important little thing to think about, that when you have your income go up, your Medicare premiums can adjust accordingly if you have a burst in income. So there's tiers to it, but the important tier to remember is for a married filing joint, you want to keep your income below $176,000. And if you're single or married filing separate, that limits $88,000. So it's just an important thing. If you're going to do like a Roth conversion, or you're going to have a huge capital gain in 1 year, your Medicare premiums are going to be affected. It's in arrears. And it only could be for maybe 1 year, but it does happen. So it's just one of those consequences you want to be aware of.
All right, thank you. Moving beyond Medicare, long-term care is something that becomes more and more common as so many are living long into their golden years. Matt, can you talk about the different types of long-term care options out there?
Sure, absolutely. We have options, and I think the ultimate goal is to figure out how we're going to pay for those options, whether you stay at home, you're independent living, assisted living, or skilled nursing care. They all can be very costly. I think the Department of Health and Human Services did a study. They say that 40% of people who are now age 65 will need nursing care, and 20% of those will need care for more than 5 years. So you can imagine we're living longer, healthier lives, but needing more and more care. We can replace a knee, we can replace a hip, a valve, but we haven't controlled this thing, the brain, yet. And so we're living longer, healthier lives. So the reality for people needing long-term care is absolutely huge.
And can you maybe go into a little more detail about the different tiers? Because I know when a lot of people think about tiers of care, because
Sure.
I know when a lot of people think about like, oh, I need long-term care, they're thinking like a really involved like assisted living or nursing home. But what other types of options are maybe out there that aren't that super duper skilled nursing?
So, and it's interesting because I think 40% of people in nursing homes should not be there. And they're there only because they have to be there. And that's why, because they spend all their money and then have to go into long-term care. And so it is so imperative and important to try to plan for this. I have a friend who was taking care of his dad at home, spending $15,000 a month on, nursing care around the clock, which his dad needed. And of course, obviously they were in a different bracket than probably you and me. They were able to afford that privately, but certainly there are different tiers of even assisted living today where, it could be memory care, non-memory care. It could be assistance with ADLs, meaning, bathing, toileting, dressing, all those things that are important. The Ohio Area on Aging is a great resource. They will come and do an assessment and see what levels of care you would need.
So how do the families get in contact with these groups? What's the best way to find someone that can come and help assess what the actual needs are?
Usually through the social worker. If you are already in a facility, the social worker is there to help. If you're in a hospital, there's a social worker, a discharge representative. These people are great. We just did a webinar with 100 social workers getting CEUs on estate law and elder law. And they were just so open and receptive. These are great people out there to help. There's also agencies that will help find a place. I know Senior Care Authority, for example, is one of them, Mark and Mary Molnar, and they're fantastic. And a lot of times the facilities will actually pay their fee to help you find a community to live in.
That's really great. Lynda, I know you have some experience with the different healthcare agencies and healthcare professionals that can help families assess needs and decide what a good next step would be. Do you mind speaking to that?
Yeah, so I know there's some geriatric planners that are out there. I in fact have a consultant, one on the east side, one on the west side, and they'll look and actually come out and do some sort of assessment. If you want your parent to stay at home or you want to stay at home, they'll come through and say, okay, you need to install bars here or whatever to make it almost like safety proof your house, like as if you were baby proofing your house, but you're doing it for an aging parent instead. And or if you're going to move, what you'd need for the move, and also nursing home placement, kind of like what Matt talked about, same sort of thing with, they have a social worker type of background, but if you're going to be on dialysis or something like that, only certain nursing homes will do that. So going to the right care facility.
So important. Yeah.
Great. So Matt, what assistance programs are out there to help families pay for this type of long-term care?
That's a great question. Long-term care insurance is probably the most guaranteed way of paying, right? You get sick, it pays for care. As Brian can elaborate probably more than I can on long-term care, it's become very expensive. So we have things such as riders on insurance policies. But for all of us, we privately pay our own care. So really what it comes down to is planning. See, I'm going to give you my 2 cents on Medicaid, if that's okay.
Absolutely.
I think it's a system that's broken. It's not breaking. It's already broken. We didn't decide, our legislators decided that we were going to pay for nursing home care out of Medicaid. And there's certain rules that are set up to make sure that that happens appropriately. Well, those rules can work in our favor if we plan. And planning has become so important because, of course, we know Medicaid has a 5-year look back. And so whether you transfer in trust or to a person, it's going to be 5 years. I think Mary just got kicked off.
Yeah, we lost our host.
Yeah. And so it's become so important to just get that planning done and in place is what really it comes down to. I think is what I'm sorry, that took me off track a little bit. We got to get Mary back on.
Yeah.
And Matt, I'll kind of continue from there because you were talking about long-term care insurance, and I before I go into that, I do think overall maybe one of the big themes of all of this is planning, whether we're talking tax planning or estate planning, financial planning, but planning overall. So sitting down with our parents and making sure we're having these conversations on what the plan is now for later, because there's no planning after things happen is not the best time to do it when it comes to any of this stuff. It's planning before things have to be done.
Exactly.
So that when things do happen, what's going to happen, or your parents know what's going to happen. But yeah, with long-term care insurance, I mean, I think the agency that you cited is the same agency I'm pulling this from, but fewer than 1/3 of Americans age 50 and older have saved anything for long-term care. And so long-term care insurance for a long time was a primary source of paying for these sort of expenses. But it definitely has, less companies are in that business anymore, and it has gotten more expensive and cost prohibitive for some people because money goes in, you put money into the policies. Typically, or most of the time, the premiums go up every year, getting more expensive. And the fear for some people is if they don't ever need to use it, they lose it. It's purely insurance. If you need it and have it, that's fantastic. If you don't need it, if If you don't need nursing care of any type, then you paid all those years for the insurance that you may never get a benefit from. So the alternative, for some people, it still may be right, but we like to, we've got clients recently that have policies in place that we're evaluating. Does it make sense to keep, or is there a better way of doing it? And a better way for some is a rider on a life insurance policy, possibly, or a recent development or newer product that came out as a fixed annuity that has a really good long-term care rider. So it's a way to put money away into a fixed annuity, get a guaranteed rate of return. Not that you're gonna write home about that rate of return, but it is a guaranteed rate of return, and it does allow for you to triple the long-term care benefit that's provided as a part of the fixed annuity. So that's one specific type of an account that could be a good alternative. But I'd say, again, us evaluating what makes the most sense for a client between self-pay, long-term care insurance in the traditional sense, or a fixed annuity with a rider, or a life insurance policy with a rider. But at the end of the day, I think the key is that there are options for all of us. It's just a matter of what the best way to approach it would be for each person's individual need, I would say.
Right. And so to piggyback on that is to do some trust planning, right? I mean, that's the other way to really start significantly protecting your assets, but we can't protect IRA, 401k, any qualified asset. So it's very important that, again, that power and partnership, right? It's state, it's law, legal, financial, and tax have to work together. Otherwise, the plan just doesn't work. It just doesn't work.
Yeah.
And we see that all the time in our offices. I'm sure you can agree.
Yeah.
Brian, there was a question that came through the chat box that when should we consider getting the long-term care insurance? I usually say like by 55. Is that sort of what you're?
Yeah, somewhere. So we've got clients that have started to look into people before the age of 50 are people, if they've already started down that path of getting long-term care coverage, it's usually people that have seen their parents get sick and go into facilities or needing the in-home care. Generally, I'd say generally though 50-ish, in their 50s is where a lot of people start usually worrying about it, thinking about it, coming to us with questions on it. And really at say 50, 52, it's still for most people relatively affordable. It's the people that wait until they're 60 or wait until they have health issues that it gets really, really expensive. Yeah.
Right. Just forget about it. Right. Yeah.
Yep.
Well, and it also covers some in-home healthcare as well, right? Typically, those policies cover in-home care.
Yep. So yeah, it's not. It doesn't always have to be somebody that goes into a facility for full-time care, right? It can cover people for that. The at-home benefits as well.
Right.
Yeah.
That's
I
great.
think we wanted to talk too about people want to stay in their homes as long as possible. So if it's safe for them to be at home, what are the options for affording your mortgage, like a reverse mortgage?
So I would take a stab at that if you would like. If you hire Jimmy JJ Walker for Medicare and all these, you get all this free stuff and it's the greatest thing since sliced bread. We know it's not. And so a lot of these reverse mortgages that I see, you'll see advertisements on TV. Who's winning? The bank's winning, right? The lender's winning. You're not winning. I think it's the last resort, in my opinion. It is a way to maybe stay in the house, but if you're really spending that money, it's going to be gone anyway. So I think a better decision is to say, let's sell the house, either downsize, think about apartment, an independent living, a senior living facility. It's definitely better than, I think, than most reverse mortgages out there. But there is a place and time for them. You just have to be so careful on fees. I don't know if you have anything to add on that or.
Well, I can speak to that. My mom's downsizing from a condo to an apartment, and there's lots of different reasons for that. But one of the reasons is that, the assessments on a condo can all of a sudden, you can't control them on a fixed income.
Right.
The place that she's living, it needs a roof, it needs a garage, it needs this, it needs that. And, Yeah, it's like, hey mom, the housing market's good. Let's get out of what you're in, get into an apartment where if something's wrong, you can call somebody, they come fix it. And they also have some, senior type living, bus and activities and all that, that'll be really good for her. So it's kind of, it's very individualized, but it's the bigger picture of, what's better in the long run. You have to think ahead and plan ahead.
Right,
Yeah.
right. And how hard is it to make that decision? You can imagine living where you're living for God knows how many years. And then all of a sudden you're saying, well, nope, you got to yank out and pull into something different. Now, most times people adjust and they really enjoy the new community they're in. So that's the hard part, is remember, it's a bump and you're going to have to be the one to suffer that bump probably. But once you get over that hump, it's a good thing. It's a good thing for them and for everybody.
Yeah, and guys, I would add too so my mom, as an example, she's been in her home, our house now for 52 years, I believe. And the idea for her to leave that house now, she's not looking forward to it. But it's a house, it's an up and down house. Bedrooms are on the second floor, laundry's in the basement. She's still mobile and fine, and we've already put railings in the house. She's 78, railings in the house, so that as safe as we can get it. Keeping the floors clean, uncluttered, all of trying to avoid trip hazards. But we've also talked to her about just the simple fact that even if she's pretty, maintains her health, but physically just can't get around as much, that at some point we're gonna have to probably sell the house and have her at least move into a 1-floor home in the best case scenario, beyond thinking about long-term care, any of the other things. But even if everything's pretty good, eventually getting up and down the steps may be an issue. She's aware of this. So we've talked to her about getting out of that house before that happens. Won't be easy, but we're talking about it and getting her mentally prepared for it.
Well, and it's all this financial things, right? And so Social Security is another federal program that some might find intimidating to navigate. Lynda, what's your advice to those thinking about when to apply for Social Security?
Yeah, so it's a very individualized question. It's a common question, but it's so individual to the person. Some people think it's not going to be there if you don't take it. So they want to get it as soon as they possibly can, take it at 62. Other people want to let it grow. Some are still working. If you're still working, you're really best to let it sit and grow, because it's going to conflict, and you don't want to make it taxable when it doesn't need to be taxable. So it's definitely an individualized question that you need to look at the whole person and their whole situation. If someone has health problems, I would say they're probably better to go ahead and take it, because, there is a break even. You have to live a certain time. And I think, Brian, you have something you can calculate and kind of go through and see when that break even point is, correct?
We do. Yeah. And most people, when it comes to their retirement plan and retirement income, 2 common questions. One, do I have enough money, and how long is it going to last? So for most people, Social Security is going to play a part in their retirement income. So typically around the age of 60, we like to start running the Social Security analysis for our clients, which will answer a couple other questions, one of which being, when do I draw my Social Security? So we input the information that we have and know, we estimate, with the client's help, estimate how long they think they're going to live. And then the analysis will show, here's the break even. And it helps people to see what the dollars are. We have them bring in their Social Security statement. So that's the most accurate record that we've got. And then we can run that and show them the break even points and the overall benefits, cumulatively, what the Social Security benefits mean if they live to a certain age. And a lot of times when people have done a pretty good job of saving for retirement, that Social Security analysis is going to show them. And if they think they're going to live a pretty long time in retirement, the analysis typically shows them waiting until age 70 to start collecting it, which defers beyond their full retirement age and allows their benefit to grow by about 8% per year. After age 70, there's no benefit to waiting any longer. That's going to be your maximum payout. I do think that the health plays a big part in it. It's kind of an obvious statement, I suppose, but Yeah, I use my dad as an example. He started collecting it when he was 62 and he only lived to be 74. So if he would have waited until 70 and collected for 4 years, now if he would have been with us until the age of 90, then I'd say 70. That analysis would show us waiting till 70 makes the most sense.
And
Is it
obviously,
those
if you
things
need
we-
it, you should take it.
Yeah,
What's that? Yeah. Oh
If
yeah.
you need
Yeah.
it to live on, you have to take it. That's not even an option, but
Yep. Yep.
as in most things, we wish we had the crystal ball.
yes.
Right.
Beyond
Right.
Social Security, balancing retirement savings and qualified account withdrawals is extremely important. Lynda, what should families consider to balance the pre and post-tax dollar withdrawals from their accounts in retirement?
Yep. When I get this question, I kind of talk about baskets of money. It's very important to have, you know, if you have all your assets stay in an IRA, every time you have an expense, you're going to have to pull money out of an IRA and create income. So it's really important to have, you know, some cash, to have non-tax, you know, non-qualified monies in like a brokerage account, and then to have some of your pre-tax monies. And that's one thing that we do here at Corrigan Krause. We do, we call it life planning, where we will list out all assets, and at that time also check titling, which we'll talk about later, you know, avoiding probate. And it's just important to say, like, okay, what all do you have? Because it's very hard to do planning without knowing the full picture. So that's important. And then a lot of times what comes out of that planning is we'll look, particularly if somebody is not at the age where they're taking their required minimum distributions, we'll look and say, should you be doing some sort of Roth conversions to get that other pocket of after-tax dollars?
Yeah. Yeah. And Lynda, I would say too, on our end, when a client comes to us and has some of these questions, you know, I've saved a bunch of money. You know, we run the financial plan. They've saved a bunch of money in their 401ks, IRAs, all taxable accounts. We start then talking about where does it make the most sense to draw retirement income from, and then also the Roth conversion part of it, I think, has grown in, I don't want to say popularity, but grown as a topic to be discussed. But the key for us on the financial advising side is to work with somebody like you, Lynda, a CPA who is intimately knows a client's taxable situation and can help us with that conversion question. Does it make sense to convert pre-tax to Roth? And if so, how much to be converted, and what does that mean from a tax standpoint? And the other part of it is when clients are doing this from an estate planning standpoint and passing money with the idea that some of this money may pass to beneficiaries. Part of that conversation is, do we want taxable money to pass to the beneficiaries, or would we rather see Roth money that's not taxable pass to those beneficiaries? And then part of that decision is, well, how well are the children doing? So if a client has a child who's a brain surgeon who's making $1 million a year, number one, maybe they don't need the inheritance, but number two, if they do, would we rather have them pass it through Roth and not pay taxes on it, or add that to their taxable income? But all again, I think the three of us, from an estate planning, tax planning, financial planning standpoint, we all sit down with the client to have this as a big picture conversation, so it's not such a siloed conversation anymore.
Well, and it's also really important if they have charitable intent, you know, then you might not want to do Roth conversions. Why would you pay the tax if you're just going to turn around and give it to charity? So
Yep.
It's looking at that whole person and seeing what the planning.
Right. I was going to say, sometimes I ask the clients, how much is enough to give to your kids? Yeah. And that depends, like Brian, you're saying, you know, as far as what they're doing and where they're at in life, that could really affect their planning. Good.
Yep.
Great.
Welcome back, Mary.
Thank you. That was an interesting time for my computer to decide to go out to lunch.
Of course. Never fear.
Oh, great. So it sounds like we are all the way into planning for giving to our children already.
Yep.
Yeah, so we had a question come in. My father has passed and my mom was diagnosed with cancer. She's 59. What legal actions would you recommend doing to protect assets, power of attorney, transfer real estate, medical power of attorney, financial power of attorney? That's kind of where we're at, if that makes sense. Mary.
And I think I was going to speak on that and say, you know, after a spouse passes, that is such a prime time to plan, because, you know, you don't want your life insurance still going to your spouse that's deceased, or, you know, you just have to change where things are going, how things are titled. So that's super important to get things retitled correctly. And then Matt, I know you can speak to all the different documents that need to be updated as well.
Well, and I would say number one is a power of attorney, a general durable power of attorney, right? General meaning it covers a lot of topics. Durable means it lasts your entire lifetime, whether you're competent or incompetent. And that power of attorney is probably the most powerful document you can have. And it's because everything shuts down. I just had a woman who, she lives on her own. She has maybe some cousins. They want nothing to do with her. She made me power of attorney, and she ended up in the hospital now needing long-term care because she's got some, we think it's dementia. We don't know if it's induced by prescriptions or whatever. But the whole point of this is without that power of attorney, we'd be going down to the court getting a guardianship. And guardianships are not fun. It's what I call an RPIA. I don't know if you know what that is. Royal pain in the, and you fill in the blank. I'll just
Right, okay, is that an acronym we can fully share? Okay.
Yeah, right. And so those, I would say to start there is probably the most powerful legal document you can have. The second to me is the healthcare power of attorney and living will, making healthcare decisions, talking to the doctors, and knowing what your mom really wants towards her end of life. Do we really want to have machines if I'm terminally ill or permanently unconscious? You know, these are all discussions that have to be made. I see a lot of times power of attorneys in my office, I call them the regular ones. The regular ones do not work. And you can Google Ohio power of attorney and you'll get a form, and that form is fantastic for those who just don't want it to work. There's ultimately something that's not working in there. And so we need plans instead of documents. We believe documents do not work, plans do. So when we talk about creating this plan with you, and in this scenario, mom has cancer, she's 59, protecting the assets, you're in a 5-year look back, no matter how you slice the cake. So we can create an asset protection trust. We can start the planning process, but then again, we don't have that crystal ball. So we wait and see what happens. I just want to add though, that remember, there's not a 5-year look back. It's not an all or nothing proposition. I can protect money even when someone's entering a nursing home. So if you're even just going in, or, you know, you say, well, I've got a terminal diagnosis, we still do the planning because we just don't know life expectancy. So,
Yep.
Crystal balls would be quite a popular item, I feel like.
yes.
Matt, are you able to walk us through some common examples of estate documentation that needs to be recorded, and why family would either choose a trust or will-based estate while they're getting all their power of attorney plan together?
Sure. So the biggest thing that you should have recorded is your power of attorney. Now, we do not record power of attorneys, but you need the original. So I usually say once a client starts using the power of attorney. So I give my daughter power of attorney. I have a stroke and she's now using this power of attorney. I always say, just go ahead and record it. It's expensive. It's $8 a page to record. And so a long power of attorney is probably, you know, going to cost you $100+, but do it, because then the original isn't as important as it was. You know, healthcare documents you can use a copy of, a trust you can use a copy of, a will, believe it or not, can even be admitted in probate as a copy. But that power of attorney is so important to get recorded. As far as whether a will or trust-based plan makes sense, to me is not about how much money you have. It's about your goals. And so, for example, if I say you want to make sure that your kids are protected when they receive the money from government, long-term care costs, divorce, business failures, you name it, then a trust makes sense. And that doesn't matter how much money you have. It's on your goals. It's goal-based. I hope that makes sense.
I think so.
Good.
Yeah, and if I could just add on that, Matt, because, you know, it was a few years ago when I brought my mom in to see you, and, you know, there's not a whole lot of assets. And the initial thought for her and my siblings was just to simply update her power of attorneys, her living will, her will. And Matt got more to the point, or more to the question to my mom, what what is most important? What are we trying to accomplish? And for my mom, it was simplicity for her children when she passes away, to be protected, to just make it easy and not to add any work for anyone. And so then we started down the trust, the kind of the trust-based planning path, which for her absolutely made sense.
Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yep, sure.
Would you be in my next commercial with a testimonial?
I'd be happy to.
Oh, great. Well, it's great that you have the relationship already, Brian, with your mom, that you guys could talk about this. She's comfortable going to Matt. You guys work these types of conversations together. But for families that maybe aren't as open about future planning, why don't we start talking about maybe some tips on how to get at least the parents to the table, start the conversation about how to document their wishes. Lynda, why don't you start us off?
Yeah, it's a tough one. I mean, the one thing that you could do is if they have a professional advisor, either attorney, financial advisor, accountant, encourage them to talk to that advisor. And then, you know, if someone came to me, I would refer them on to the rest of the team that they need to speak to. You know, possibly you could show them this webinar. I don't know, that might be an option too. But the biggest thing that you could take away from this is, you know, planning is so important. We've said it a million times, but you know, when someone is in crisis, the last thing you want to be saying to them when they're in their hospital bed is, hey, where are your passwords? You know, do you have a power of attorney? Where is your stuff? You know, you got to have these conversations so that, you know. And I know I had a client a few years back that her and her dad had done all the planning, and she said it was the greatest thing ever, because then he did it when he was healthy, but when he was sick, they just didn't have to have those conversations, and they could just be there for each other. And you know, so that's a great maybe thing to pass on, to open up that conversation. But then the other thing too, I would offer is, you know, I do a lot of meetings that I'm with both generations, with the children and with the parents, or the kids are bringing the parents in, and that can be very impactful, because the kids really kind of need to know what's going on. So,
Brian, do you have any advice?
I agree with everything Lynda said. I do think that getting all people in the room at the same time is one of the keys. It's not easy, hard conversations. It might take a while to get to that point, but I think that it's, you're having a person's professional staff, meaning us, with them, as well as other loved ones, other family members, whoever those people are, to get them in the same room at the same time, to have these conversations. So there's no secrets. Everybody knows what's going on. And beyond the legal documents that Matt was talking about with the estate planning, I think just having stuff in writing, some of the organizational stuff in writing. Here are the documents that I have done, or here's where you can find things, or here's all my bank accounts, where they're at, or just all of that kind of planning stuff, to have it, I would say, on a one-page piece of paper in it somewhere. Just, it's not even necessarily a legal document, just a planning piece, so that if something happens, the loved ones in the room know where to go to find all the information that's needed. So again, getting everybody in the room, planning, writing stuff down, will just simplify or help keep everybody organized when things aren't going the way that we want them to go.
Got it.
Yeah.
And any advice?
I think that's great. And just to piggyback on that, because we're in such a digital world, having those passwords and usernames are so important, that somebody knows where that's at, you know. And I'm the cobbler whose kids don't have shoes, right? Nobody knows my passwords. And so I'm just as guilty, but so important today. You know, it's funny, because the hardest client I have is the one that says, oh, I don't know why we're making a big deal about this. You know, my mom gave me the house. She had me on her checking account, and everything went smoothly. I don't know why we have to do any planning or worry about this. And so it's those people who really, you have to ask, well, what keeps you up at night? You know, what is the 2 a.m. question in your head that says, oh my gosh, I'm so worried about what? Well, I mean, that can be a number of things. And one of the opening questions that I always say is, when I get parents or people that are are really kind of butting the conversation is to say, do you want all your money to go to a nursing home or to the government, or use those key words? And all of a sudden it's like, well, no. Well, yes, but if you don't do something, then certainly that's going to happen, or could happen, right? So it's really hitting those pain points, I think, for those people to say, what is it that'll make them do something? And you have to remind them that 30 years ago is totally different than today, right? We didn't, you can say, well, yeah, it all worked fine because, you know, you took care of your mother in your home. Do you want me to take care of you in your house? Now, some people say yes, and other people are like, no way. And I know for sure I don't want my kids wiping my butt. So I want care. If I want care, I better be planning. So how do we get them to the table? Sometimes that's very, very hard. But one of the things we do is we do an educational workshop about estate planning. And that can just be something you throw on a computer and say, here, let's sit down and watch this for the next, well, it's 3.5 hours. No, I'm kidding. It's only 40 minutes, but something to get them get that spark started, to get them to the conversation, get them to the table.
Right. I've seen you advertise those on LinkedIn. So for anybody that's on LinkedIn, go ahead and follow Matt. Matt will post when those workshops are available, and they're free, which is great.
Thank
so this is all great information, and I think it's really actionable for our attendees here. So we do have a few questions. The first one is, this would be helpful if my parents were in agreement in how to financially prepare themselves. My dad just thinks we want his money and did not do anything to prepare himself or my mother for what comes next. So they have some knowledge of what is to come, but how he sounds like a tough nut to crack. So if we can't get dad to watch a webinar for 40 minutes, Matt, what do you think, if anything, this adult child could maybe do to help dad understand that it's not about, I want your money so much as I want your money to go where you want it to go?
Yeah, and it's really tough. And I always say, it's the old adage, you can sometimes lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink. And I see this especially in the Depression era babies, right? They are very, keep it to myself, not wanting to share and not wanting to open up to their family. I think, again, it's just hitting those pain points. You got to find something that really affects them. And if you say, do you want all your money to go to the government? Most people say, oh, no, I don't want that. Well, then let's do something about that. And so that's my best suggestion.
You know, another impactful thing that you can say that I've said to clients is, you know, it'd be really nice if you have intention to leave your kids something. It's okay to gift them something while you're alive and watch them enjoy it too. So that can be impactful as well.
Yes.
That's a good perspective too. Another question, if aging parents have a trust, do they still need to spend down?
So that's a tricky question, and I'm going to field that one. I hope that's okay. Everybody's nodding their head. Yes, please take that one. I don't want it. So spend down is really a Medicaid term, right? So if we're in a point where Medicaid will only pay for nursing home care when you have exhausted all of your funds and you're down to $2,000 or less to your name. So that's what I'm assuming we are talking about when we talk about spend down. So you can't just give your money away. There's a 5-year look back, as we talked about. And so we have to do certain things to do that spend down. Certain things are allowable by Medicaid, such as prepaid funerals. And believe it or not, it's prepaid funerals for the spouse, the person in the nursing home, their children, their spouses, siblings. I mean, you can pre-plan funerals for probably, let's say you have 6 kids and they're all married. We can do 12 funerals at 10 grand a piece, is like a huge amount of spend down. So, but most people don't want to just have their benefit be in funerals, so they can do other things, and that is to create a trust. And there's really 2 types of trusts in this world. There's revocable and irrevocable. And the old adage is irrevocable. Well, revocable was what I call the can trust. You can be a beneficiary, you can be a trustee, you can amend it, you can change it, you can. Irrevocable typically means you cannot be a trustee, you cannot control it, you cannot be a beneficiary, you cannot change it, you can't amend it. We're doing what we call irrevocable grantor trust. And that is kind of the asset protection trust that will start that 5-year clock ticking and keep you in control. That's the key. If you're offered any plan in which you have to give up control, don't do it. I just had a client come in today. They came in with an irrevocable trust and they put the house in it. And this was done a year ago. And I said, well, you lose up the stepped up value basis, right? Because you put it in an irrevocable trust. Your dad has no control anymore. Not that in that situation it mattered, but all these reasons we want to do an irrevocable grantor trust.
Got it. And the last question we have here is, unless somebody jumps in again, is setting up finances to avoid probate. Is that a possibility, or at least could we limit the amount of probate that an estate needs to go through?
I want everybody to avoid probate. Most people say I want to avoid probate. I don't know what it is, but I know I have to avoid it, right? They just don't understand it. So let's talk a little bit about probate and what it means to be in probate. First of all, probate is a court that administers wills. So people tell me all the time, I have a will, I'm not worried about probate. Well, that's the farthest thing from the truth, because all wills go through probate. Probate works on how you own things. So for example, let's say I have a joint account with my wife and I pass away. The money goes to my wife, no probate. I have an account with a beneficiary on it, or a life insurance with a beneficiary on it, or a car with a designated beneficiary. I pass away, it goes to that beneficiary, no probate. If I own something in my name only, that is where probate comes in. And so if I don't have a beneficiary, I don't have a joint owner, then it goes through probate. However, probate's not the only answer, or the only question, I should say. You should be asking other questions. And that's what we'll ask you when we meet with our team, because part of this is saying, let's say I have 3 kids and I make all 3 of them transfer on death beneficiaries to my stock account with Brian. And all of a sudden one passes away. Well, now it goes to the other 2, but the kids of the 3rd one don't get anything. And you say, well, that's what I not wanted to happen. Yes, but you avoided probate. But you see, there's other things to consider. So we have to be so time consuming and considerate of all the issues. I think some of the issues we face today is spendthrift, right? I've got Tommy, you give him $1, he's already spent 5. Susie, she's been through bankruptcy 3 times. But you know what? When I die, let's just give them money. Well, that doesn't work. Why? Because they spend in the same way they spent when they didn't have the money. In fact, there was a study done, it was 40,000 to 4 million. Didn't matter how long and how much they had. It took them on average 18 months to spend that inheritance, right? So we have to protect these people. And how do we do that? We do it with a trust. In fact, I'd say you love your kids way too much to give them money. You love them enough to give them a trust. And so by giving them a trust, the trust doesn't die, a trust doesn't become disabled, and you can decide how much control they have within that trust. So that's hopefully a little insight on how that works.
I love that adage. You love your kids enough not to give them money.
Absolutely.
That's an incredible stat about the 40,000 to $4 million. But I mean, I can see how that can happen.
Yeah.
Well, if there's no more questions, did you guys have any final thoughts that you wanted to leave our attendees with today? We've covered a lot of really great information. If we're
Well, I'll lead just with in closing thought. Just I think for all of us with aging parents, just making sure that we're having these conversations, whether it's the Medicare, the Social Security, the estate planning, the tax planning, the financial and retirement planning. They all go in together. It's not individual conversations. It's talking about all of these things, documenting things. And I think just making sure that our parents are prepared for the future. Not easy to do. Sometimes not everybody's on board, but just making sure they're prepared to make decisions now rather than waiting, and make sure they have a plan in place and lean on us as the trusted experts in all of those given areas.
And I'll say, just, it's one of those things, it's almost like once you do it too, you're so happy that it's done. So instead of worrying about it and it's keeping you up at night, just, contact your team and get it going.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And don't forget, power and partnership, legal, tax, financial, it has to work together or it doesn't work.
Great. Well, thank you everyone for joining us today, and thank you for bearing with us during the Zoom issues at the top of the webinar. So everybody that attended today, again, thank you very much. We will post this recording, probably with a little disclaimer about the technical difficulties. But if you would like to follow up with any of our speakers, their email addresses are up on your screen. And if they are not, I will include them in the email that I'll send out. And if you would like any of their contact information and you are watching this as a replay, please email info@corrigankrause.com, and I'll be more than happy to connect you with Matt, Lynda, Brian, or any other expert that you think you might need for your team. Please keep an eye on Corrigan Krause, CKE Financial, and the Deliberato Law Center LinkedIn. There's a lot of great information. Brian's team does webinars. Obviously, the Corrigan Krause team, we do a number of informative webinars. And Matt's team has a lot of really great estate planning workshops that are available as well. So with that, thank you very much, everyone, and have a great day.
Thank you. Thanks so much for the opportunity, Mary.
Thanks.
Thanks.